asked Miss Bellingham. "None whatever," replied Mr. Jellicoe. "He finds it as great a mystery as I do, but he thinks that we may get some suggestion from the director when he comes back. He is a very great authority, as you know, and a practical excavator of great experience, too. But I mustn't stay here talking of these things and keeping you from your pottery. Perhaps I have stayed too long already. If I have, I ask your pardon, and I will now wish you a very good afternoon." With a sudden return to his customary wooden impassivity, he shook hands with us, bowed stiffly, and took himself off toward the curator's office. "What a strange man that is," said Miss Bellingham, as Mr. Jellicoe disappeared through the doorway at the end of the room. "Or perhaps I should say a strange being, for I can hardly think of him as a man. I have never met any other human creature at all like him." "He is certainly a queer old fogey," I agreed. "Yes, but there is something more than that. He is so emotionless, so remote and aloof from all mundane concerns. He moves among ordinary men and women, but as a mere presence, an unmoved spectator of their actions, quite dispassionate and impersonal." "Yes, he is astonishingly self-contained. In fact, he seems, as you say, to go to and fro among men, enveloped in a sort of infernal atmosphere of his own, like Marley's ghost. But he is lively and human enough as soon as the subject of Egyptian antiquities is broached." "Lively, but not human. He is always, to me, quite unhuman. Even when he is most interested and even enthusiastic, he is a mere personification of knowledge. Nature ought to have furnished him with an ibis's head, like Tahuti. Then he would have looked his part." "He would have made a rare sensation in Lincoln's Inn if he had," said I, and we both laughed heartily at the imaginary picture of Tahuti Jellicoe, slender beaked and top hatted, going about his business in Lincoln's Inn and the law courts. Insensibly, as we talked, we had drawn near to the mummy of Artemidorus, and now my companion halted before the case with her thoughtful gray eyes bent dreamily on the face that looked out at us. I watched her with reverent admiration. How charming she looked as she stood with her sweet, grave face turned so earnestly to the object of her mystical affection. How dainty and full of womanly dignity and grace! And then suddenly it was borne in upon me that a great change had come over her since the day of our first meeting. She had grown younger, more girlish, and more gentle. At first she had seemed much older than I, a sad-faced woman, weary, solemn, enigmatic, almost gloomy, with a bitter, ironic humor and a bearing distant and cold. Now she was only maidenly and sweet, tinged, it is true, with a certain seriousness, but frank and gracious and wholly lovable. Could the change be due to our friendship? As I asked myself the question, my heart leaped with a new hope. I yearned to tell her all that she was to me, all that I hoped we might be to one another in the years to come. At length I ventured to break in upon her reverie. "What are you thinking about so earnestly, fair lady?" She turned quickly, with a bright smile and sparkling eyes that looked frankly into mine. "I was wondering," said she, "if he was jealous of my new friend. But what a baby I am to talk such nonsense!" She laughed softly and happily, with just an adorable hint of shyness. "Why should he be jealous?" I asked. "Well, you see, before we were friends, he had me all to himself. I have never had a man friend before, except my father, and no really intimate friend at all. And I was very lonely in those days, after our troubles had befallen. I am naturally solitary, but still, I am only a girl. I am not a philosopher. So when I felt very lonely, I used to come here and look at Artemidorus and make believe that he knew all the sadness of my life and sympathized with me. It was very silly, I know, but yet somehow it was a real comfort to me." "It was not silly of you at all. He must have been a good man, a gentle, sweet-faced man who had won the love of those who knew him, as this beautiful memorial tells, and it was wise and good of you to sweeten the bitterness of your life with the fragrance of this human love that blossoms in the dust after the lapse of centuries. No, you were not silly, and Artemidorus is not jealous of your new friend." "Are you sure?" She still smiled as she asked the question, but her glance was soft, almost tender, and there was a note of whimsical anxiety in her voice. "Quite sure. I give you my confident assurance." She laughed gaily. "Then," she said, "I am satisfied, for I am sure you know. But here is a mighty telepathist who can read the thoughts even of a mummy, a most formidable companion. But tell me how you know." "I know because it is he who gave you to me to be my friend. Don't you remember?" "Yes, I remember," she answered softly. "It was when you were so sympathetic with my foolish whim that I felt we were really friends." "And I, when you confided your pretty fancy to me, thanked you for the gift of your friendship, and treasured it, and do still treasure it, above everything on earth." She looked at me quickly, with a sort of nervousness in her manner, and cast down her eyes. Then, after a few moments' almost embarrassed silence, as if to bring back our talk to a less emotional plane, she said, "Do you notice the curious way in which this memorial divides itself up into two parts?" "How do you mean?" I asked, a little disconcerted by the sudden descent. "I mean that there is a part of it that is purely decorative, and a part that is expressive or emotional. You notice that the general design and scheme of decoration, although really Greek in feeling, follows rigidly the Egyptian conventions. But the portrait is entirely in the Greek manner, and when they came to that pathetic farewell it had to be spoken in their own tongue, written in their own familiar characters." "Yes, I have noticed that, and admire the taste with which they have kept the inscription so inconspicuous as not to clash with the decoration. An obtrusive inscription in Greek characters would have spoiled the consistency of the whole scheme." "Yes, it would," she assented absently, as if she were thinking of something else, and once more gazed thoughtfully at the mummy. I watched her with deep content, noted the lovely contour of her cheek, the soft masses of hair that strayed away so gracefully from her brow, and thought her the most beautiful creature that had ever trod the earth. Suddenly she looked at me reflectively. "I wonder," she said, "what made me tell you about Artemidorus. It was a rather silly, childish sort of make-believe, and I wouldn't have told anyone else for the world, not even my father. How did I know that you would sympathize and understand?" She asked the question in all simplicity, with her serious gray eyes looking inquiringly into mine, and the answer came to me in a flash, with the beating of my own heart. "I will tell you how you know, Ruth," I whispered passionately. "It was because I loved you more than anyone else in the world has ever loved you, and you felt my love in your heart and called it sympathy." I stopped short, for she had blushed scarlet and then turned deathly pale, and now she looked at me wildly, almost with terror. "Have I shocked you, Ruth dearest?" I exclaimed penitently. "Have I spoken too soon? If I have, forgive me. But I had to tell you. I have been eating my heart out for love of you for I don't know how long. I think I have loved you from the first day we met. Perhaps I shouldn't have spoken yet, but, Ruth dear, if you only knew what a sweet girl you are, you wouldn't blame me." "I don't blame you," she said almost in a whisper. "I blame myself. I have been a bad friend to you, who have been so loyal and loving to me. I ought not to have let this happen, for it can't be, Paul. I can't say what you want me to say. We can never be anything more to one another than friends." A cold hand seemed to grasp my heart, a horrible fear that I had lost all that I cared for, all that made life desirable. "Why can't we?" I asked. "Do you mean that the gods have been gracious to some other man?" "No, no," she answered hastily, almost indignantly. "Of course I don't mean that." "Then it is only that you don't love me yet. Of course you don't. Why should you? But you will, dear, some day, and I will wait patiently until that day comes and not trouble you with entreaties. I will wait for you as Jacob waited for Rachel, and as the long years seemed to him but a few days because of the love he bore her, so it shall be with me, if only you will not send me away quite without hope." She was looking down, white-faced, with a hardening of the lips as if she were in bodily pain. "You don't understand," she whispered. "It can't be. It can never be. There is something that makes it impossible, now and always. I can't tell you more than that." "But Ruth, dearest," I pleaded despairingly, "may it not become possible some day? Can it not be made possible? I can wait, but I can't give you up. Is there no chance whatever that this obstacle may be removed?" "Very little, I fear. Hardly any. No, Paul, it is hopeless, and I can't bear to talk about it. Let me go now. Let us say good-bye here and see one another no more for a while. Perhaps we may be friends again some day, when you have forgiven me." "Forgiven you, dearest!" I exclaimed. "There is nothing to forgive, and we are friends, Ruth. Whatever happens, you are the dearest friend I have on earth. or can ever have." "Thank you, Paul.